Hello, everyone. My name is Laurie Smith, and this is One Child Abuse Survivor to Another, the continuation. And that's just what I thought to call it. We're looking at the Survivor to Thriver workbook. It's a manual from the ASCA, Adult Survivors of Child Abuse and More Center program. That's what we've been looking at for a few weeks now. And just so that people can, if you've never seen it, never heard of it, you have an idea of what it is and whether or not it'd be helpful for you if you're a survivor of child abuse. And it's free to use. You can grab it from their website, and that's www.ascasupport.org. And you can download it. If they don't charge anything for that. They want survivors of child abuse to be able to get a hold of it. And so if you want a hard copy, they do charge for that, like a small fee for the printing and the collating and all that. And I have my friends here. I've got Wanda here and Passaggio Olivello. Hello. Hope your morning's going good, Wanda, so far. And I hope you're having a good day and a nice evening. Passaggio Olivello. And I'm just waking up. I'm still drinking coffee. I'm trying to wake up here. It's 9 o'clock, but I've been up for a while, but a little bit of a rough start this morning. So we'll continue on with this manual. We're looking at through the steps. It's a 21-step healing kind of process for adult survivors of child abuse. So you have to be aware of what's okay for you to listen to. Like if the topics of abuse or anything like child abuse might bother you, you need to just make that decision for yourself and just turn the channel. You won't be hurting my feelings at all. Child abuse is very disturbing. It's a disturbing topic, and I grew up in abuse, so I'm okay to speak about this stuff and read this stuff. But if you're just starting out on your healing journey, you want to do a safety check. I always say this because it's just so important. You don't want to be triggered. And if you haven't done a whole lot of work on your healing journey and something trigger you, you just don't want to have a miserable day. You don't want to, self-injure or hurt somebody else or anything like that. So if you're just starting out in your healing journey, just do a safety check and just say, or actually we can all do this. I don't have to do this because I'm okay to look at this stuff, but you have to be careful, right? So you can just say to yourself, am I safe enough? Do I feel strong enough to be able to look in it and be able to hear something like this morning? Is this going to bother me for the rest of the day and I'm going to have a miserable day thinking about things that and I can't get a hold of my therapist or something? You really need to make that decision for yourself. And if you think it might bother you, you can always check that manual out another time when you're feeling stronger. If you want to come back and listen to my stuff, it'll be here. It's like if you really want to see what I had to say about it. So, you just want to keep yourself safe. That is the most important thing. And this is an adult-oriented show. So I always, quite often will throw a sort of a word out. It's not for children. It's not for younger children. I'm talking about very adult topics. But this won't be graphic this morning. This Survivor to Thriver manual workbook it's a healing resource for adult survivors of child abuse, right? So we're not going to be too graphic here or explicit, but just be sure what you're okay to listen to, And if this might bother you, just turn the channel. You won't be hurting my feelings and all, like I said. So we'll get right into it. We left off at step 10. We finished 9. We're on 10 out of 21 steps. So we're about halfway through. We're on page 90 of the workbook. If you actually grab it as a PDF or read it on the web page, I'm not sure. Probably have it set up so you can find the actual pages, but it's step 10. And this step says, I can control my anger and find healthy outlets for my aggression. So this is if we were in the ASCA meeting or you're just reading this yourself, we can actually look at that step and say, I can control my anger and find healthy outlets for my aggression. Now, whether we can or not, that's another story, right? Whether I can control my anger or, find healthy outlets, that's what they're hoping that you will do, right? As a survivor of abuse. This is something I had to work on because my anger was not external out towards other people. It was internal and I was always imploding. So almost like an internal rage. So that can happen too. We have to find healthy outlets for our anger, right? And anger, like I was talking before, I did a lot of study on anger and anger management. I was looking at a website called angerresources.com, and it's still there. I checked it out. It's Dave Decker and Mike Obsatz. They put this website together, and they have all sorts of resources on there, but they also have a lot of free material. And you can do an anger test to see where you fall in the, how you're handling your anger. And it's really, I thought it was a very useful tool. and it's a lot of it's free on there. I think you can buy some stuff if you want, like some of their books and things, but they have it set up so that people can really learn a lot about anger and what healthy anger is and what toxic anger is. And I needed to learn this because I had issues with anger that obviously they were imploding. So I was hurting myself instead of other people. I didn't want to hurt anybody else. So, then I hurt myself, right? So anger, toxic anger is not okay. Health is okay. So we do need to know how to manage anger. And anger is a really important part of our lives. We need to be able to be angry, but it needs to be appropriate anger and not toxic, right? So that's the issue. So I've done a lot of looking at that, but I'm going to put that, it's angerresources.com. So it's www.angerresources.com. And I checked it out, and that site is still there. So that's pretty cool. So that's many years ago I looked at this. At least it's probably 10 years that I've looked at that. But I remember that because I went through it so piece by piece. I wanted to learn as much as I could about it. So they said here, this is the Survivor Thriver workbook. Step 10 is similar to step 6 in that anger and aggressive or abusive behavior are intricately connected. And this step focuses on mastering control over your abusive behavior and establishing safe and acceptable methods for you or for discharging your aggression. So anger may be a natural emotional response to your childhood abuse, but aggression and abusive behavior directed at others repeats old patterns. You need to manage these emotions carefully to avoid hurting yourself or someone else. Becoming an abuser would obviously set back your recovery because in so doing, you would undermine the compassion you are developing for the child victim you were and the adult survivor you are. Remember that feelings of anger don't have to be expressed as aggressive or abusive behavior. That's very true. But until we learn that, a lot of people don't know that. That's why we have so many problems. Anger doesn't have to be aggressive or abusive. Right? So it's that's where I was. I didn't want to be my abusive parents. I didn't want to emulate them. To even though what they did to me affected me. But the thing is, I didn't want to be them. I wanted to be the opposite of them. Because they were so hurtful to their children and to each other. And I thought, I don't want to be like that. I don't want to be like that. I don't like that. I don't like people like that. So I want to be somebody who does not abuse people, see, and doesn't hurt people. So that was my thing. I didn't want to hurt people with my anger, and so I didn't know how to actually get rid of it in a healthy way. So they'll have some suggestions here. But they say aggression is both learned and a product of physiological factors, mostly hormonal. By aggression, we mean abusive or domineering aggressiveness directed at other people. Children often learn from their parents or guardians to respond with aggression towards others during stressful situations. For this reason, many survivors get stuck at this step because their aggression has such a firm hold over them. Survivors can learn to respond aggressively to conflict situations very early in life. And this is then reinforced by the relationships they attract and enter into, as well as the influence of an increasingly violent popular culture. And they say boys may be more likely to identify with their fathers and girls with their mothers because they are the same sex. However, this is not always the case. Many survivors identify with and learn violent behavior from the parent of the opposite sex. So you can't change the past, but you can develop new strategies for controlling aggressive behavior in your current and future relationships. And that's just it. This is a lot of learned behaviors. And some of it, sometimes, it's not, but I think for a lot of people it is, for a lot of adult survivors of child abuse. These are learned behaviors that we need to change. Because I know my parents were very violent, physically violent really in every way. They were just violent people, and not to the neighbors. They were really good to the neighbors, and the neighbors really liked them, but they were really violent to each other. So behind closed doors, nobody's looking. They were at each other's throat, and they were horrible to their children. But they didn't mind treating us horribly out in public, so they did do that. But they were good to the neighbors, so they weren't these violent people that went around beating up on the neighbors, and stuff like that. They had friends. People loved them. They thought they were just great, and they thought that their children were just a bunch of losers, right? It's like that's why they had to beat on them all the time. So, it's just kind of sad, but that's the way it was. And I had picked up a lot of violent behaviors from them. Even when I was very young, I remember and actually all my siblings did, because we were very destructive, because that's how my parents were. And so we were just copying our parents is all we were doing. And I had to, as a teenager, I had problems with that. Very destructive behavior, destroying property, just wrecking cars, just kind of crazy behavior. I really didn't want to hurt anybody, so I didn't really go around beating up on people or anything like that. I didn't want to be a bully type, right? But people stayed away from me because I held myself sort of in a certain way that people would recognize it, not to mess with me. So, you know, a lot of aggression, just acting out, and problems in school with damaging property, stuff like this. All of my siblings kind of got involved in this kind of stuff, and we just learned it at home, because that's how we grew up. Furniture being thrown across the room and smashed, and all the glasses being thrown across the kitchen, and just violent, really angry, abusive, horrible behavior. And we learned that, and we took that on. I went on to then, as a young adult, not know how to handle anything, and just emulating what I saw, what I learned how to do in any kind of situation where I became angry. I'm breaking dishes and I'm busting things, and I was just doing what my parents were doing. I just learned from them how to behave. See? So I had to really work on that to change that, and it took some work. By the time I hit my 40s, and started my healing journey, I was a lot more mellowed out. So I didn't really go around doing that stuff anymore. But into my 30s, I was still doing that. So, but I realized I don't want to be like that. I don't want to be my parents, and I don't want to have, I don't want that in my life, right? So I started making changes even before I started my healing journey for my sort of that type of toxic behavior. But I was never really working on the healing journey stuff till the age of 40, 44, really, 42, 44. So these are really tough issues. We've learned this stuff, and we need to actually learn how to undo it. So it's really, it's not really our fault, but we need to change it so we can have a good, healthy life, right? This is the thing. So we're not hurting ourselves or hurting somebody else. Self-help, it says, this is a self-help section. That's a pretty short little blurb they have to say about that. But number one, regardless of what happened to you as a child, you are always responsible for your actions as an adult, just as your parents' abusers were responsible for what they did to you years ago. So whoever the abuser was responsible, that's right. Some survivors harbor fantasies about getting revenge or punishing their abusers for what occurred. It is one thing to have these thoughts, and quite another to think about acting on them. So if you entertain fantasies such as these, you are entering dangerous territory, and we suggest that you seek professional help immediately. Actions taken on such thoughts could constitute criminal acts and subject you to severe penalties, including jail. Well, I just didn't want to be my abuser, and that's the whole issue. When people have asked me, did you write your books for revenge? This kind of stuff. Did you go public for revenge and all that? Some part of me wanted to say maybe yes, but that wasn't it at all. I just wanted the truth to be known, because, I didn't want to be my abuser parents. That's just it. That was so horrific what they did, and they hurt each other. I think had they not been hurting each other and they would have abused just us, their children, I wouldn't have looked at things the same as I do. The reason that I was able to sort of separate it out was because they were hurting each other too, right? Not only were they hurting us, they were hurting each other. So I didn't want to be that, I didn't want to be like them. And it's just, so horrific to then become that as an adult. So that's almost my main thing in life, my main goal, to not resemble anything of my parents. So I had to work at it, you know what I mean, to lose all the garbage that I learned from them, and that I picked up along the way because of the abuse, and so that I don't look or resemble anything of their behavior or who they were, because I didn't want to be an abuser and hurt them, and none of my siblings did either. And that's quite interesting, because in many cases where there's many adult sort of boys, I mean, it was a huge family, like there was 7 children, and 4 of my brothers were just as tall and big as my dad, but they probably could have all ganged up on him and beat him up, but because he's a big guy, my dad was in the military, he was very strong, and he was very tall. I mean, he was big. Wasn't heavy like a heavy set man, but he was very, very physically well. Like he was in good shape. And so my brothers, probably all four of them, if they were all together, could have taken him on. But my brothers didn't want to hurt my parents. See, none of us wanted to hurt our parents. Our parents didn't mind hurting us, but we didn't want to like become them and become abusers. Hi, Tessa. How are you? I'm doing good. I hope you're doing well too. And we're just looking at the anger, one of the anger steps in this Survivor Thriver workbook, and it's step 10. And they're saying, if you have sort of the idea that if it rolls around in your head sort of, quite often, that you'd like to retaliate against your abusers, if you act, it can be dangerous ground, because if you actually act on it, you could be the one going to jail. You could be the one going to prison. And is it really worth it? For me, it was more, I didn't want to be my abusers. So, I wanted to be the exact opposite. So that's how I get my revenge. It's kind of like, ha ha, I'm having a good life. That's the truth of it, man. It's like, you couldn't kill me. Yeah, and you couldn't get me to kill myself. No, I'm having a good life. So, that's, have I thought about that sort of stuff? Not really. You know what I mean? It does. I don't sit around thinking, oh, I'd love to get that kind of revenge. No, because I don't want to be like them. See, that's just the issue. But these things are so hard. They really are. But you have to be really thinking about what kind of life you want to have. If you do something like that, it could come back on you, and then you're the one going to be doing time, and your abuser will be out free, right? So that's no good. I think it's just really be careful, with what you're thinking and doing. Right? Number 2 on the self-help section says you have good reason to be so angry, but you need to be able to separate your right to have these feelings from your right to act on them. As is stated in the ASA meeting guidelines, we draw a line between thinking or feeling angry and actually doing something abusive through words or actions. If you can learn to express your feelings with people you trust, as opposed to acting out feelings against them, you can dissipate this built-up aggression without becoming another abuser. And this is interesting that they say this. They say for men who are inclined to aggression and violence, this may be one of the most important steps of recovery and the most difficult to achieve. I don't know why they put that in there, because women can be just as much abusers as men. My mom was a very vicious woman, and she also was abusing my dad. So it wasn't just my dad abusing my mom. My mom would retaliate, and she couldn't really get the best of him, because she was really tall. She was almost 6 feet tall. She was a big woman. But the thing is he was still stronger than her. But she'd smash him in the head with really huge, heavy objects. And I would think, wow, that should kill him. You know what I mean? But he'd get back up. And then of course beat her up. But the thing is she really, she was also vicious, right? And vicious with her children. But she was so tired of abuse. She was abused as a child, and then married this man that just treated her so horribly. And I could see why she was the way she was. But I wish that my parents would have got help, see, instead of just trying to kill each other all the time. That was the issue. It's kind of like, all of my siblings, my older siblings, because my parents, when they were arrested and busted on child abuse charges, were told to go to counseling. And that's the only way that they were going to allow us to stay in the home, is if my parents went and did this counseling. And not for just their own, not just for their marital problems, but for their own issues, And they went to 2 sessions, and that's it. So, they just didn't follow through. They should have followed through. I would have loved to see my parents change their ways and make amends. And, that didn't happen, right? So it's really unfortunate. But women can be very abusive too. I don't know why they always kind of make it look like it's just the guy. It's not always just the guy. One of my sisters actually was abusive to her husband, physically abusive. And he was much bigger than her. He could have taken her out. But the thing is he didn't want to hurt her. So he just allowed her to hurt him. And that's terrible. But my sister, she grew up in the same house I did. She was the oldest. I'm the youngest. And she was like, I'm getting the upper hand. She took on the abuser role, which is really sad. They didn't really abuse their children, not like my parents abused us, but but they weren't very kind to their children either. And so she, they didn't handle it well. My sister never got help for any of this stuff, and she passed away at 60 from cancer. So, they didn't have a happy life, right, as adults, because they had this abusive relationship, her and her husband. And he stuck it out. Like, I mean, we used to tell him, why are you still here, man? Allowing her to treat you like that? Like, I'd be gone. He was like, well, I love her. See, that's just the issue, right? So it's really not always just men that can be abusers. Women can be abusers too. And I just want to clarify that because I don't know why they would say that. Anyone can be inclined to aggression and violence. I had many friends, especially in high school, who were girls. I don't want to say girlfriends. Like some of my friends who were girls who were very aggressive and used to beat up guys. Used to go around beating up guys, and that was their nature. Right? I just never was really that type. You know what I mean? It's just I don't think violence is okay. I don't like violence. As a matter of fact, I hate violence, and it's because I was brought up in a violent situation. I actually hate it because I see the aftermath of what it does, and it's not okay. So anybody can be violent. So for them to put men in there is just not. I don't really like that. But whatever, it's their manual, so that's fine. I just always usually say if I don't agree with something because just why not? Number 3, make a list of the situations where you lose control of your behavior and become aggressive. Can you identify the determining factor in losing control? And what feelings tend most to trigger the abusiveness? What do you hope to accomplish by reacting aggressively? Does it work? How do you think the person at whom you are directing your aggression feels? Do you feel optimistic about being able to control this part of you, or do you feel hopeless? Are there any external factors such as alcohol or drug use that might be related to losing control? And what are your healthiest options for controlling your frustrations and coping with stress? Once you have identified them, see if you can't find ways to apply them in the typical situations where you lose control. Well, this is the issue, and that's what abuse really, if you study what abuse really is, it's really a form of control. That's mainly why people abuse. It's to have control. And they'll use whatever means they have to. So if it has to resort to physical abuse, then they do. If that's just the way they feel that they can get the upper hand, and that's why my parents abused us. It was a way to control all of us to behave a certain way. And they didn't want us to be there. They didn't really want us, see? So when they actually heard us talking or heard one of their children laughing or heard one of their children in the house playing, they became angry because they didn't want all of these kids. And they were just like, their nerves were shot. And so they just used abusive behavior to control the situation. So that's what abuse mainly is. It's a way to control. So that's what anger is. It's a way to control. People will use it as a tool. And if it's toxic, it's abusive, right? Toxic anger is not okay. That's what abuse is. But there are ways to express our anger without hurting somebody, and that's healthy anger. So there's a total difference between that and because we do need to get angry sometimes. We just really do, but we don't need to hurt people with it. And there's a way to do it without becoming the abuser, right? So that's why it's important as adult survivors to not channel our anger because we were abused as children into this toxic anger where we're going to hurt somebody or hurt other people, because then we're no better than the abuser. We're no better than an abuser out there. We're just the same. That's what they're doing, right? So this is the issue. It's really important. I know I had a lot of work to do with anger, especially so I wouldn't self-injure and all of that stuff. I had major work to do with anger, and I did a lot of work on it. So they say number 4, if you are having a very difficult time learning how to control abusive and aggressive behavior, think about joining a focus group or taking a class in parent effectiveness training or nonviolent behavior alternatives. You might be able to find an anger management or other similar educational course that emphasizes expressing anger constructively rather than destructively. And local community mental health services and community colleges may have programs. Check with your employee assistance program at work or your HMO health insurance carrier for possible community listings. And you can usually find this stuff online. If you just type in anger management, doesn't have to be anger resources. I put that link into the chat there, but I actually found that by typing in anger management, and that came up. So there's all kinds of stuff out there to talk about how to deal with this stuff. And then if you are really struggling with it, there's support groups out there. They really are. So it's just good to know that that stuff is there, right? If you have issues with that, because not everybody does, right? Um, Number 5, learning how to short circuit your aggression will mean hard work and tailoring behavioral strategies to fit your individual needs. And once you have acquired the necessary behaviors, you will need to practice them so they become instinctive responses and part of your behavioral repertoire. So it's just, making changes. Basically, that's basically what this healing journey stuff is really all about. Is we see a problem, we identify a problem in our life that really, was caused by something that wasn't our fault, being abused as children. But then we need to then do something about that, because otherwise it's going to keep causing problems in our life. You know what I mean? So that's what I've been doing. Right? And it's a lot of work. Like I said, it doesn't happen overnight. It takes time to do this stuff, and to really kind of think about this stuff. Like, wow, what do I do? When I become angry, how do I handle it? I usually used to start writing this stuff down. Kind of how I dealt with stuff. That way I could see it, and I'd be like, oh yeah, that usually causes me to become hostile. You know what I mean? Or whatever. So it's just important to get in touch with yourself and see what you're doing if you are actually, in fact, having anger issues. Right? Professional help, number 1. What kind of aggressive, hostile feelings are activated in your therapy sessions? What seems to trigger them? Have you discussed this process with your therapist? Now, this is a legitimate topic for your therapy, and your therapist should be able to help you with it without withdrawing needed support from you. And that's just it, because that's why anger is important, because not everything is going to be okay for us. You know what I mean? And we may have run into stuff in our life that causes us triggers sort of these feelings of anger or hostility, but we need to be able to deal with it without becoming abusive, right? But it's perfectly okay to experience anger. It's just not to allow it to become this toxic mess, right? So a therapist would know that. They should know that. Right? Number 2, one last word. Your therapist is legally required to warn potential victims, and in some cases, to notify law enforcement officials if they reasonably believe that you are likely to harm yourself or another person. So in such a case, your therapist is permitted to break the confidential relationship between the two of you in the interests of protecting both you and your intended victim. For this reason, as well as their interest in your continued growth and well-being, your therapist is not able to support or condone violent actions under any circumstances. They just want people to know that therapists and counselors and stuff have the right to actually break that confidential thing if they think you're going to hurt yourself or somebody else. And I think it's not a right. They're actually mandated to report that, because they don't want you to go out and kill somebody or injure somebody to the point where they actually die in the hospital, because if they can prevent that, because that's I think a lot of times we see a lot of this stuff going on out here in the world, murders and people just losing it and killing somebody. I'm not even talking about child abuse. I'm talking about adults, right? I think a lot of that is just anger management problems. People just need to get a grip and realize that it's not okay to go out and just kill somebody. It's really not. And it's good that we have laws to protect people, even though it's too bad for the person that died. The issue is that then we need to protect the rest of society from that person who went out and killed that person. This stuff is not okay. It's really not. This abusive, behavior. It's not okay. We know people are killing children. You know what I mean? It's not okay. No, to get angry and kill a child. It's not angry to get angry. It's not okay to get angry and abuse a child. It's not okay to get angry and abuse anybody, right? So this is the issue. Anger is a huge problem in our world, and people don't know how to manage it. That's why we see what we see going on out there. And if everybody would have an anger management course and actually have to follow through with it, this world would be a much better place. It really would. So, it's just important. Step 11, we'll move on. It's page 92 of the workbook. It says, I can identify faulty beliefs and distorted perceptions in myself and others. I can identify faulty beliefs and distorted perceptions in myself and others. Well, I guess that's taking a look at some of these things that are really toxic, You know, this step, it says, is focused on changing the faulty thinking, attitudes, and beliefs about yourself and your past that continue to shape your view of the world. Given that the thoughts and attitudes born of your abuse will never really favor you, it is essential that you learn to challenge the internal tapes that are likely still playing in your head. And it says, because their childhood experience has often been extreme, many survivors become victims of their own misconceptions. A few examples of this tendency are: number one, splitting everything into good and bad, or thinking in black and white. Two, discrediting the positive aspects of yourself or your efforts. If it isn't perfect, then it's nothing, quote unquote. Magical thinking. Number three, magical thinking, or attributing some outcomes to factors that are not relevant. For instance, I was born under the wrong stars, so nothing will ever change. Or I got lucky once doing this, so all I need to do is repeat myself. Number four, basing conclusions on initial impressions or circumstantial evidence rather than balanced objectivity. Quote unquote, I don't know why I did it. I thought this guy had it in for me. Or number five, personalization, assuming responsibility for something caused by other people or factors. That'd be, for instance, somebody saying that it was their fault that somebody abused them. That they must have somehow been responsible. That's faulty thinking. It really is. Number six, magnification and minimization, either making something catastrophically important or excessively diminishing its importance. There may be other types of distortions that you still fall prey to, perhaps more out of habit than anything else. And that's why I think some people will diminish abuse, and this because that's just how they deal with it. So many times people will say stuff like, oh, it really wasn't that big of a deal. I survived. This kind of stuff, and it it's we need to learn how to call it what it is. And not maximize, not minimize, just call it what it is, the truth, right? So it's kind of just being truthful, I guess, with ourselves, and losing that faulty, the faulty beliefs and these perceptions of ourselves that really are not true, right? So the self-help section here, it says, number one, read, this is page 93. Read back over your journal and see what distortions in thinking, perceptions, and attitudes you have had about yourself. Notice the obvious patterns. Are there any common themes in these distortions or as regards behaviors and feelings? I guess it should be regarding. So that's, we could journal this stuff. We could sort of journal about how we see ourselves, distortions in thinking, perceptions, and attitudes you've had about yourself, right? So I could do that for myself. I actually have done that. And that's where I actually had to start doing that self-affirmation stuff. And, because I had these distorted, faulty beliefs that I was just useless, because this is stuff I heard growing up. I should have been born dead, stillborn with the babies that died before me. My mom used to tell me that. Stuff like that I was just no good and all of this stuff. And I'm like, part of me obviously as an adult doesn't believe that. I'm like, obviously that's not true. But then there's another part of me that actually holds on to that and says, yeah, when things aren't going well, things in life are kind of caving, crashing in, stuff not going well. That's when those old tapes will come back out, because obviously I'm down on myself because maybe I couldn't control something and my life's now become a problem, it's a mess or whatever. Throughout my life I've had this issue going on. And I had to really sit and look at what these faulty beliefs were and faulty perceptions and realize no, I'm just a person like everybody else. And I'm no better and no worse than anybody else. We all deserve to be treated with respect and dignity. And we all deserve to live an abuse-free life. And there's all these things that we all, as human beings on the planet, we all share and we all have the right to. And I thought, all of that stuff that was put on me is completely faulty. And I don't have to keep believing any of it. That I was that way. Because as an adult, I know that that's not true. All that stuff my abusers told me. And I have no problem, remembering that's not true, what they said. But the issue is that little part of me, that wounded part of me from so long ago is still there, and remembers what they said about me and remembers how hard it was. And so I have to remember that, not to live in the past. You know what I mean? I'm in the present. I'm the adult in the situation. And everything those abusers told me was actually, all of it was false. And it was just me. It was just meant to be hurtful, you know? So I need to lose all that stuff, you know, about me not being uh, worthy of love or whatever this stuff is. You know what I mean? Because that's wrong, right? We all have to find out what those things are, those toxic thoughts that kind of keep coming around plaguing us about ourselves, that keep us feeling lesser than, or hi Mandy. How are you? I hope your day's going good. Yeah, thank you so much. God bless you. And you know, it is, well, you know, I started speaking like so many years ago, and I just thought, you know, I'll come back on and do some more one child abuse survivor to another stuff. And you know, I like to share with people. I just know that there's so many people out here struggling, and even if you're not struggling, who have been through so much, and it's good to have validation, somebody who understands. And you know, even if I don't know your story personally, just understands how hard it is and what you've come through. You know, just for some validation for people. Yeah. So that's. I'm glad you could come and be here. We're talking about faulty perceptions and beliefs of ours that we might have picked up from the abuse along the way, that we then, as an adult, are still, this tape's still playing around in our head, like, yeah, I'm not worth it, or nobody could love me. You know, a lot of people feel that way. I've heard, and I never name names, but I've heard a lot of survivors say stuff like, you know, in the past that they were told that nobody could love them and stuff like that. And that's absolutely horrific thing to keep with you as an adult, because it's not true. None of that garbage was true. That's why I was reading John Bradshaw's book, Healing the Shame That Binds You. That's a great book. And he was talking about all this role stuff, role playing, toxic stuff that adult survivors have been put through. And that all of this stuff, these things have been put on this necklace, and it's been put around our neck. They don't, if you're a guy, you could say a chain or something, you know, it doesn't have to be a necklace. And all of this stuff's on this necklace around our neck, and we're carrying it around. All these horrible things that they said, whoever the abuser was said to us, whoever these people that hurt us, whoever these people were that made us, you know, feel a certain way about ourselves, it's all still hanging around our neck. And if we've got to get rid of it, we really do. And I pictured myself with all of this stuff that my parents had told me, especially my parents, very, very hurtful. Some of my siblings too, but mainly the really hurtful stuff was from my parents. And all of this garbage that they made me feel and experience. And I took that thing off and in my mind and threw it away. I'm like, I am not wearing that anymore. I'm not wearing that, you know. I'm not a loser. I didn't deserve to be born dead and stillborn. It's, you know, and I am worth it, you know. Stuff people, people don't deserve that, right? You don't deserve that from anybody. I didn't either. And so I don't have to keep wearing that thing. You know what I mean? And keep listening to that garbage that was told to me from so long ago that's in my memory tank, banks here. None of that was true. So then like I said, maybe having a time in my life where things are kind of going down, so I'm not all that, feeling all that great. And all of a sudden the tapes start playing, yeah, I'm just a loser, stuff like that. And I'm like, no. We're not going back there. I do count, I do matter, and so do you. So this is the issue. We need to change that faulty way of thinking. Yeah, absolutely. And the way that we see ourselves. Because I had a lot of self-loathing going on. Part of that was part of my whole issue with the suicidal ideation, just self-loathing, hating my body, hating myself. And that's all gone. That's gone. I got rid of that, man. I'm like, no, I'm going to start learning how to love myself and take care of myself, right? Because we so deserve to have a good life, the same as anybody else. Whatever a good life means for you. You know what I'm saying? We all have different needs. We all have different wants, different ideas, but the thing is we all deserve the same opportunity to have that, right? And so as adults, survivors of abuse, we need to, realize that stuff wasn't okay. And we don't need to keep doing that to ourselves, because now we're just doing it to ourselves as adults. Nobody's around me telling me this stuff anymore. This is from so long ago, right? And it's like, okay, I need to lose that stuff. Right? It's like I've been hanging on to that for a long time, but it's because it was just ingrained in my head. See, and hi, you mad? Yeah, accepting ourselves as true unconditional love. Absolutely. That's what I quite often have realized that, over the last so many years, I've really learned how to even love the parts of me that aren't so lovable. I'm like, I do love myself, even the parts that are, you know, still not that great, wounded, whatever. Just learning how to love me for who I am on any given day, whether it's a good day or a bad day, and accepting that I'm not perfect. And I will never be perfect. It's not going to happen. So I need to love myself with what's going on, with the wounds, with whatever's going on in my life, and just accept myself for who I am, right? And not allow that stuff to keep holding me back. You know what I mean? Because a lot of times we'll let that stuff keep us from actually seeking out a friendship, or keeping us from seeking out what it is that we need or in our life, that relationship with somebody, or because we just feel that we're not, for somehow we're not good enough. We're not, we're not worthy enough, or whatever it is, right? Whatever these issues are. So we need to lose all that. That's all faulty. So in other words, it's not true. And yeah, shedding these chains for once in my life. I love me as is. Yeah, that's right. That's right, Mandy. And it's just so important. And I people will say, oh, just a bunch of people running around saying they love themselves. Like Stuart Smalley. I am good enough. All these affirmations. Actually, it's really true. So don't let anybody tell you anything. I've really learned how to love myself, and it's because it's great. Because I no longer wake up and look in the mirror with this self-loathing and self-hatred stuff going on. You know, I'm just like, yeah, no, I'm doing it. Yeah, life is so much better than it used to be, man. Let me tell you. But it took some work. Like I said, it's not easy. So we can, like they said, you can journal. If you are journaling, you can go back and look at some of your distortions of thinking, these faulty attitudes and faulty things we might think about ourselves. And we can notice patterns, right? And that's what I did. And I really started working on changing this stuff. I did this a long time ago, way back in like 2010, probably. Number two, the most basic skill for you to learn is the ability to stand back and view events and situations from a broader perspective, so as to become more objective in your perceptions, beliefs, and judgments. This skill is essential because this analytical ability is called into play in virtually all aspects of your life. It can make the difference between repeating old habits and choosing new ways of looking at things. And that's basically what I did, because I sat down when I started writing the blog that became A Life of Death or Redemption. It was just a public facing blog originally. And I would sit down, I was just looking at the whole picture, like from my eyes from about 13, but I was also looking at the whole entire big picture of really what happened, and what caused me to be the way that I was, and taking a big look. It was good for me to do that, because then I was able to see, wow, a lot of my choices, not all choices were made because I was abused as a child, but a lot of my really sort of detrimental choices, or not so healthy choices that I've made in my life, were because I was abused as a child. And I'm like, I need to take a look at what I'm doing now, to make sure that I'm not still doing some of this stuff because of the abuse that I suffered. See? And that's how you can kind of get a hold of it, is to take a big picture look. Sometimes when we're looking at too many of just the little details, we don't see that big picture. So I did a big picture look at the whole entire thing, and I was like, this is just, I need to make some changes, because I can't change the past, but I can change my future, and I can change how I feel about myself, and that's been the biggest thing for me, is to change how I feel about myself. Obviously, I can't change how other people see me, you know what I mean? And I can't change what my abuser family thought of me or thinks of me, you know? That will never change. But the issue is, and like the past, of course, we can't change the past, obviously, right? But what I can do is learn how to change how I feel about myself. And that's been the biggest aid in my recovery, of course, because I see myself differently. And I see myself, um, through my adult eyes, instead of looking at me through my abuser's eyes, or through my own toxic look at myself. You know what I mean? Now I'm like, hey, things are okay. I just, I'm doing the best I can, and that's all I can do. And I can't, like, I mean, seriously, so many times survivors of abuse will, that old stuff from the past, trying to be people pleasers, trying to be perfect, it's not going to happen. You know what I mean? We can't control everything to that point, right? I can't control how anybody sees me. I have to be okay with myself, right? That's what it all comes down to. That's exactly what it comes down to. I have to be okay with myself, right? And so I had to go back and do a lot of work and I'm still, like I said, working on some stuff and to actually learn to love myself for me. You know what I mean? And yeah, with all of the imperfections, and there's a lot, let me tell you. So it's like, that's been the biggest, greatest thing of all from this healing journey thing. Because I know that when I leave this earth, at some point, I'm going to leave peace in my heart. Peace in my heart, love for other people, love for myself, and the fact that I am no longer that still wounded child, still laying in the corner, bleeding, right? I've got help. I'm safe. You know what I mean? And I'm not being abused anymore. And I've got that control in my life. I control who I let in my life. I control what I let around me. Um, so yeah, I mean, it can be good, right? But we need to get it to that point. And like I said, it's taken me a long time. That's why I keep doing these shows, because I'm like, this is a real look at somebody's life and how it doesn't necessarily happen overnight, or even within a few weeks. It takes time to do this stuff, and it's hard. Yeah, that's true, Mandy. It's really that's the only thing that really matters. It's true because we can't control how other people see us or feel about us. We could hope that people in our lives that really matter to us. If people don't really matter to you, it doesn't really matter, right? But the people in our lives that really do count and really matter because they're close to you and you have a relationship. Of course, we want people to love us and care about us, and being abused in any way can cause them that feeling of, oh, I'm not worthy of love. I'm not, feeling down on ourselves, or that we're not capable of having these relationships, and that's just not true. You know what I mean? There's nothing true about that. So losing the faulty perceptions is very important, and and losing that old role playing stuff too, very important. So they say number 3, whenever you uncover some distortion in your thinking, attitudes, or beliefs, try to determine the reality of the situation, and then use this as a standard against which to evaluate your thought processes. Don't assume you know something when you really don't. You may have to make a particular effort or engage in some specific activity in order to access the information you need. By learning to identify what is objectively true, you can determine the validity of your previously held beliefs and then substitute a less distorted version. And the thing is I think it's just that we got to be honest, honest with ourselves, first of all, and it's like, taking a look at this stuff. I mean, those old tapes were playing around of what my abusers told me that really hurt me and, I mean, caused me problems in my adult life. Um, that I was really nothing more than a punching bag, and really, I was a loser, and I was never gonna make it as an adult. That's what I was told. I was just gonna end up dead like the brothers. This was always what my siblings would say to me. You're just gonna end up dead like the brothers, and all this was as if they were losers because all my siblings that you know actually survived for any length of time would run down my brothers, right? Because they were drug users and they were abused horrifically. I remember. It means I remember this. They do too, but they had no compassion in their heart, and they just loved to hurt. Like my siblings were not. We just grew up in this huge horrific mess. We did not come together to bond and try to save each other from the abuse. We just actually hurt each other, right? And because we wanted to avoid the abuse, so you always took the parent's side. So if my mom was on a rampage ready to beat on somebody, then of course you're going to be on her side, because it's like you don't want that beating. So it's like, okay, I'm sticking on mom's side because just to try to avoid the abuse, right? But Yeah, it's important to cut those tapes out. But that's just the thing, some of that stuff, it's just so, um, just so horrific. And getting a hold of it, and actually realizing like, wow, all of that's, it's a distorted view of myself, and none of it was true, you know. So getting a hold of that, and it's just being honest with ourselves. Like I said, like they say, it'll, if you do look at that stuff, and you can determine the validity of your previous held beliefs, and that's just true because I looked back at it and I'm like, none of that was true. None of it was valid whatsoever. And I was actually basically living the life that they told me I was going to live. They told me I was a loser. I didn't deserve to be alive, and I was just going to be dead by a young age, and I didn't deserve to be on the planet anyway. So I basically, which is really bizarre, but I basically then started to live that life, especially in my teens, because I'm like, hey, I'm a loser. I don't deserve to be here. I never should have been born. Um, I deserve to die. My mom should have killed me when I was a baby. All this stuff that was rolling around in my head all the time, and because abuse was still coming, you know what I mean. Then that actually became my life. I was destructive to myself. I was destructive to trying to, not wasn't necessarily trying to kill myself, but I was perfectly fine if I died in some sort of horrific car accident, because I was always wrecking my cars and driving really crazy, not on drugs, and just headed for uh, a real uh, blowout of a death. Really, is what I was doing, and I was just doing what my parents told me I was going to do. You know what I'm saying? I didn't realize that. See, and I didn't realize that that's why I was doing it. You know what I mean? I just thought I was just kind of rebellious. You know what I'm saying? Um, and the thing is what I was doing was just living the life they set up for me, right? And when I was like I talked about it in one of my videos in Born in Hell series, I was like, at age 18, I had that car accident, and my mom was telling me, "Look what you're doing to your life. You're ruining your life." And I just clicked because she had told me that before when she was like burning me in the oven, and I'm like, look what you're doing to yourself, right? And I'm like, that just clicked in, and I'm like, look what I'm doing to myself. I'm like, look what you did. You know what I mean? And I was like right in her, right. I couldn't really stand up. I was on crutches and I was really drunk, But I told her, oh, I was just had a major drunk. I just friends of mine wanted to throw a party for me because I just come out of the hospital a few days before, and I was on Demerol, and we were drinking like bottles, big bottles of alcohol. I was just so tanked, but I remember this because it just hit me that she was putting it on me, that all of this stuff that had happened to me was my fault, that it was me doing it to myself. And I'm like, she told me that before when she was burning me in the oven. And I was like, you guys, you're the ones responsible for this. You put me here. This is what, and even later at the age of 21, when my brother, 20, when my brother killed himself, um, my mom was like, "Oh, don't you care?" And I'm like, "You're the one that put it there, man." I didn't mind saying stuff like that because that's the truth, you know. And so we have to be honest with ourselves if we're ever going to um, make progress in our healing journey. We have to be honest with ourselves, and that's taking an honest look at what they did, an honest look at what we did it because of it, and then saying, "Well, I don't want to live like that. I want to live a decent life where people in my life treat me decently and I treat them decent, and they care about me and I care about them. It's this great symbiotic relationship, and nothing's perfect, like I said, but hey, it's better than abuse, and people that actually really do care. That's the kind of people I want in my life, and in order for me to do that, I had to make some changes to my behaviors, right? Can't just put it off on everybody else and say, well, it's just them, it's just their problem. I had to learn what's my triggers, what's causing me to push people out, what's causing me to, yeah, I mean, I knew I had problems, but the issue is I need to get down to the root of exactly so that I could start seeing the patterns and make the changes. Because until we see that pattern, it's very difficult to see why we're doing something, right? And so, you know, it's just bizarre how this stuff works, right? Um, yeah, thank you, Mandy. I appreciate it. I did. Well, I used to tell them that's probably about the age of 12 on, really. I was just like, I'm going to say it because you're going to beat me anyway, so I don't really care. And, I just gained my voice. My sister even told me, she said, you never used to say anything until you were about 12 years old. You were just silent. I was like, that's silent. After that, I'm like, you're going to beat me anyway. I'm just going to speak my mind, say what I'm going to say. And I'm glad that I did because at least it was true, you They said here, number 4, ASA meetings might be good environments in which to talk about the negative internal tapes that still play in your head. You might also share some of your success in identifying and changing faulty beliefs and distorted perceptions. So that's if you're actually going attending an ASA peer-to-peer support group meeting, right? So these things are, like I said, most people who haven't been abused wouldn't have a clue how hard it is for abuse survivors unless they've actually known someone and gone through and talked to them about this stuff, or have some idea. Most people in our lives may not even understand that we have this stuff going on. So that's why they don't, they can't really help. It's kind of like, people who are not abused and don't know anything about this stuff, they might feel bad for us if they knew about it, but they can't really do anything to help, right? So it's just so important to, reach out to people who at least understand where you come from, and if you need help with this stuff, like I always say, if you don't want to be struggling on your own, because I always tell people don't struggle on your own, because that's what I was always doing, and I was always end up in a huge funk of depression, and which then was lead to suicidal ideation and all of this stuff. So I'm always telling people don't do that. Reach out. I wish I would have reached out sooner. Like I said, I really do. I wish that I wouldn't have waited so long to reach out. And it's just weird how things like that happen. They always say that those breakthrough crises, I called it a breakdown. my last breakdown at the age of 42, 41 and a half. They call it a breakthrough because that's actually where I started my healing journey. So I wish it would have happened a lot sooner than that. I really do. It's a shame that it took that long for me to get help, right? To realize that I needed help. I mean, I was like, what is wrong with me, man? I was like, of course I know what's wrong with me. The issue is, I know what I've been through. It's enough to kill anybody, man. It's enough to cause people to really, this kind of stuff happen to anybody. It's not good. You know what I mean? So I know what happened to me, but now why am I not getting help? And I thought, hey, it's because I was told that I did not deserve any help. There was no help for me. And I just took that on and kept it with me my whole life. Oh, I'm fine. I don't need any help. And even when I really do need help. So that's why I was like, okay, no, I'm going to reach out and get help. And I'm going to change this situation. So this is the issue. This is the best thing I ever did because, I'm still here. And that's great. Yeah, I always say it. Every day that I wake up is a slap in my abuser's faces. Absolutely. Because they couldn't kill me. And they tried, and they couldn't get me to kill myself, which is, hilarious. 2 of my brothers lost the fight, man. They went down, they took their own lives, and my abuser parents won the victory on that. They killed them years later. They didn't kill them as children, but what they did to them killed them as adults in their mid-30s. And I was heading the same way. So was one of my sisters. And, but my sister, she ended up living to 60 and died of cancer. But the thing is, I was like, there's no way I'm not going down. They are not taking me out. They couldn't take me out then, and they can't take me out now. So that's my victory, man. That's what I'm saying. And I don't do it by being abusive or hurtful or getting my vengeance that way. I do it by having a really good life. It's like, what a burn. What a burn on my abuser family who thought that I was just deserving to be, beaten and kicked and, sexually abused, and they just thought that's what I deserved, and I'm like, I'm having a great life. It's like, it's so awesome, right? That's what I want for you too. That's why I keep saying it. This victory is yours as well. Stick it out, my friends. Don't give up. you know that's right, Mandy. You made us stronger, and you know, and we do it with a smile. That's right. They couldn't kill me, man. And that's the thing. So many of us have been through so many hurts, such horrific stuff. And it's not even if it's just physical abuse. We're talking emotional abuse, psychological abuse is the worst. And it's like all abuse is so incredibly damaging. So that's why I'm saying every day I wake up, it's a slap in their face. Yeah, who won the fight, man? I did, and I was just this little girl, defenseless little girl, and they could do that to me and think that that's okay. And I'm like, no, man, you know, I win. I hold my head up high, I stand strong, I stand tall, and I'm like, there's no way. I'm not taking myself out. I'm not letting them take me out. I'm going to have a good life. Whatever that means for you, I want you to do the same. So I'll be back on tomorrow morning. And thanks for being here with me. I had Mandy here and Wanda and Passaggio Olivello, and I had you, Mad. Thanks for being here with me today. I really appreciate it. I used to do these shows all by myself. It was quite lonely, and I appreciate you just spending this time with me. Really nice. I hope your day goes well and your night goes well. And if you need any resources, get a hold of me on my about section. My email and all that stuff is there. If I can help you find resources or just info or whatever, or you just need a shoulder, you need an ear, you can get a hold of me, right? And yeah, I'll be back on tomorrow morning. So have a good day. Some days really suck. Like I said, I always say have a good day, but that doesn't mean, I'm just thinking everybody's going to go have a good day, because you know what? Some days are really crap, and they really are. And some days just really suck. Let's just put it that way. So all I can say is I wish you a good day, and I really hope that it is a good day. And if it's not, hang in there, my friends. Reach out, get help. Don't struggle on your own, like I said, especially if you don't want to be on your own. Because some people are loners, and that's totally cool. But, if you don't want to be on your own struggling, reach out, get some help, right? Take care, everybody. Till tomorrow.